This is called Dialogue, widening your horizons.
Hey, this is Arlene.
Hi, this is Gowri.
And this is we are at our third segment, which is the ABC Dialogue. We have here Suri Kempe. She's a program manager of Sisters in Islam. Today he's going to talk about a topic that is quite a hot topic, which is liberalism and pluralism. Pluralism. I'm not very good at pronouncing certain words. Is it really a threat? And this is referring to a fatwa against Sister in Islam because it's considered a deviant organization. First of all, can you explain what is the background of this fatwa and why they consider your organization as religiously deviant?
Well, let's see. Let me just read out what the fatwa actually says, or at least try and sum it up. So the fatwa declares this as subscribing to religious liberalism and pluralism, and it allows for any publications that are deemed liberal and plural to be banned and seized. It also calls for any form of social media that go against the Ajaran Islam dan Hukum Syara to be blocked by the MCMC, and any publications, for example, to be seized and destroyed. And finally, it says to repent. Now, of course, initially, excuse me, we didn't know about the fatwa, at least not until the 20th of October. And this happened when I was randomly surfing Jakim's e-fatwa site.
Wait, it happens like quite some time ago?
So, yeah, that's what I'm getting at. I was randomly surfing the e-fatwa site, I was looking for a different fatwa. And I just happened to click on this one, on this particular one. And I was, of course, shocked to see that the entire fatwa began with Sis Forum Malaysia is so and so and so.
When the fatwa was gazetted?
That's right. The fatwa was gazetted on the 31st of July, and that's
this year.
Yes, that's quite a while ago. And this was the first time that we found out about it by chance. You see, and the thing is, so we received no notification, no prior excuse me, meeting request, nothing of the sort, nothing from the authorities, not from the Selangor Fatwa Council or from the Religious Council, to call us in and have a conversation with us about the work that we do. Nothing of the sort. And what's troubling about the whole thing was that we have a 3-month window from the time the fatwa is gazetted, which is the 31st of July, to file a judicial review. And so the deadline then was the 31st of October. And so we had 10 days, literally.
Ago.
Yeah, we had 10 days to pull everything together and quickly file a judicial review. You know, so we were quite, taken by surprise. We were quite shocked. When we found out, in fact, we immediately wrote them a letter asking them to explain what these terms were, what liberalism and pluralism really meant. But we didn't receive a response from them. And of course, with the impending deadline to file a judicial review, we had no choice but to proceed with the action.
Mm-hmm. So no answer for them until now?
No, we've received no response from them at all. Not yet, at least.
So when you guys were filing the judicial review, you also held a press conference about this?
Yes, we did. That was on Friday when we filed. We held a press conference to explain why we filed a judicial review. And we named 3 respondents: the Selangor Fatwa Council, MAIS, Majlis Agama Islam Selangor, and the Selangor State Government.
Mm-hmm. To be exact, which religious body that is in charge with creating all this fatwa?
Well, the Selangor Fatwa Council does that at the state level. MAIS then, the Religious Council, Selangor Religious Council, then recommends its gazettement, that it be gazetted, yes.
So when let's say they want to create one fatwa, let's say you cannot like spit on the floor. I mean, I'm just give an example. Like, do they just simply make it up, or do they have to consult certain body or the parliament, the state assembly? Sorry.
Well, there's a particular enactment, the Administration of the Religion of Islam, Selangor enactment, actually specifies that in the process of, I think it's section 48, but I think in the process of creating a fatwa, the Fatwa Council may commission a study, may look into the issues. I mean, obviously, if you're an administrative body the way the Selangor Fatwa Council is, then any opinion that you put forth should be well researched, right? I mean, if you're about to issue a fatwa on, say, heart, any kind of medical procedures, obviously you would have to consult with experts in the field and the people who do that work and the people who will be affected to find out what the issues are on the ground, right? So whether or not, in this case, the Selangor Fatwa Council or the Mufti called for a study is unclear. It's not really transparent. What is clear to us, however, is that they did not request to speak to us or consult us or even clarify what type of work it is that we're doing and whether or not we subscribe to liberalism and pluralism as the fatwa so claims.
Are they usually, is it a common practice for them to simply do fatwa on every single thing in a Muslim's life?
Well, apparently not, because, or they might. I think it's quite selective. And essentially, I mean, that's what a fatwa is. That's how a fatwa works, right? It's an advisory opinion, and it comes about in response to a question posed by a person to these authorities. Excuse me. So if someone asks a question, then they can provide an answer. But the difference is in Malaysia is that we're probably the only Muslim country in the world where not only are fatwas legally binding, to have any opinion that is contrary to a fatwa is criminalized or deemed offensive. In fact, let me see, the punishment is, at least in the Selangor enactment, is that any person who gives, propagates, or disseminates any opinion concerning any issue, Islamic teachings, or Islamic law, contrary to any fatwa for the time being in force, can be fined up to 3,000 ringgit or jailed for up to 2 years. And it's interesting as well that the Section 13 of the Sharia Criminal Offences Selangor enactment actually states that any documents or other mediums may be seized and destroyed even without any conviction. So even if they don't find you guilty, they can come in and seize and destroy books which they deem to be against, containing any opinion against a fatwa which is in force.
Gowri, you just now you have some curiosity about fatwa.
Yeah, I was wondering how who actually enforces this thing, like, because it says, based on my research, is a mufti, but of course I'm not too clear about
What's
the role
of a mufti,
and what gives him the power to actually come up with the fatwas.
Well, the state legislative assembly does. I mean, so you have particular enactments which the state legislative assembly passed, like the Administration of Islam Selangor enactment, which then give power to the Mufti and the state and the Fatwa Council, State Fatwa Council, to issue fatwas. Yes. So interestingly, however, in this particular instance, we filed, just to clarify, we filed a judicial review against Selangor's fatwa because one, I mean, on clear constitutional grounds. One was that it violates our fundamental right to freedom of expression, association, and religion, as guaranteed by the federal constitution. It also trespasses federal powers, as only Parliament has the legislative authority to make laws restricting fundamental liberties. So the fact that it encroaches into these fundamental liberties is unconstitutional. But it also, as a state agency, as a state body, it has no authority to direct federal institutions like the Ministry of Home Affairs to ban and seize books and the MCMC to block social media sites. So I'd also like to point out that Sis Forum Malaysia or Sisters in Islam, is registered as a company. And a company cannot, by its very nature, profess any sort of religion. So we'd like to also, we'd also like to find out through this judicial review whether or not the state religious department has jurisdiction over companies.
Mm-hmm. But was there a clear definition of liberalism or pluralism?
No, there actually wasn't, which is why, everyone is somewhat confused.
Okay.
Excuse me.
But throughout the years, like, how do they really define, according to what they react to to the lifestyle of modern society, what constitutes liberalism and pluralism?
Let's keep it to the fatwa. And in the fatwa, it's not defined. There's a national fatwa issued by the National Fatwa Council, which does give some sort of definition of liberalism and pluralism as being a component of liberalism. But again, at least for our purpose, the Selangor Fatwa does not even make reference to the National Fatwa with that definition. And despite the fact that there is no definition in the Fatwa, they have used it as a basis for declaring us as sesat and menyeleweng or deviant. And that raises some big questions, right? Like, how does MAIS make allegations about cis organizations, individuals, institutions subscribing to liberalism and pluralism without defining what it means? One. How can they accuse cis of liberalism and pluralism without mentioning what specific writings and actions subscribe to either or both? And then that leads to, of course, do they really know the kind of work that we do, right? So I'd like to take this opportunity then to set the record straight and stress that we are an organization of Muslim women fighting for women's rights from within Islam. We have helped close to 10,000 Muslim women who turn to us for legal help, and we've trained nearly 4,000 women with knowledge they say, and more than 90% have said it has empowered them to know their rights within Islam. And so my question is, how does that constitute liberalism and pluralism, and is it therefore sesat and menyeleweng? What we are not, and this is a common misconception, what we are not is a religious organization that's trying to spread a new theology. We make no such theological claims, not in relation to other religions. I mean, we work from within the framework of Islam, and what we are trying to promote is women's rights. So
when it comes to liberalism, it's such a huge umbrella. I mean, there's economic liberalism, political liberalism. I mean, even in terms of social life, there are different aspects of different people subscribe to, ideologically liberal life, but doesn't mean it's the same thing. So it seems like they have probably a fixed idea about what liberalism is. It's just that they don't know how to link it to the system in Islam. They just assume liberalism.
Right. And before they issue something as serious as a fatwa which criminalizes non-compliance, so for which non-compliance is criminalized, then shouldn't they make sure that those definitions exist? Really, I'd like to see them prove how on earth we subscribe to something that is, by their standards, not defined.
The word liberalism and pluralism has become such a word that is so sensitive that even politicians don't dare to use it. But where does the fear come from? I mean, I don't think 20 years ago people actually feared that particular words.
Right. I mean, interestingly, this goes back to sometime in 2006. And I think there were organizations in Indonesia like Jaringan Islam Liberal, which are theological organizations and do make theological claims. And I think some of the more conservative elements of the authorities or of the religious ulamas in Indonesia basically protested against them. And so when these words first emerged in Malaysia, the way it was understood was adopted wholesale from the way the Indonesians understood it. So I think back in 2006 was the first time, these words kind of emerged in the Malaysian landscape. But back then I think there was even a flyer that was circulated that said, CIS was a branch of Jaringan Islam Liberal from Indonesia. And, I think one of our members was at a conference or panel when this claim was made. And she stood up and said, no, we actually existed 10 years before Jaringan Islam Liberal. So how on earth could we be a branch of, We've existed way before them. So, yeah, what we are, though, is an organization, a women's rights organization that works from within the framework of Islam.
But why the fear of this different theological understanding of Islam? Are they really against Islam?
Well, that's what the religious authorities would like us to believe. But, really, you'd have to do an interview with them, call them in and ask them, what is...
like, who has the authority over Islam? Is it the state, or is it like political organization like JIL, Jaringan Islam Liberal?
Well, definitely not JIL, in Malaysia, at least, what we are doing is we have ceded this authority, or at least legally, to the religious authorities. But obviously challenges to define Islam, continue to happen in the public space because a lot of people, I think, are just sick and tired of the hate. I think people refuse to submit that Islam is a religion that encourages Muslims to hate other Muslims, that allows us to cut off sections of our own community so that one group can feel as if they have the sole power to define Islam.
So that means who has the authority to define Islam should be decentralized to individuals.
Yes, you could say that, yes.
We'll take a short break. When we return, discussion about this very contentious issue.
ASEAN Breakfast Call Dialogue, widening your horizons.
Hi, this is Arlene.
Hi, this is Gowri.
And of course with us is Suri Kempe.
Hi.
Hi.
So we've been talking a lot in the first half about fatwas and all. So for a lot of people out there wondering what a fatwa really is.
Well, it is essentially what it is an advisory opinion by someone who's learned in religion to give to Muslims, which is usually given as in response to a question posed by a Muslim in order to help that Muslim, lead his life according to Islam.
Do you need to be part of the state? Or do you need to be within an official institution to
Traditionally,
be
no.
to give
Traditionally,
fatwa?
no. During the Prophet's time, people went to Aisha for advisory opinions. People went to, different people, right? Obviously the Prophet, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, but at the end of the day, it's merely an advisory opinion, which you can ask one person, but if his opinion kind of doesn't sit well with you, his or her opinion doesn't sit well with you, you're allowed to go fatwa shopping. You're essentially allowed to ask another person, and asking another person for a different opinion, as another learned person for a different opinion, doesn't make you any less Muslim.
So in theory, I can actually ask like an independent ustad that is not attached to any institution or any state mechanism for his opinion and consider that as a fatwa if I agree with him.
Essentially, yes.
And it's not legally binding. It's
No.
So,
But the peculiar thing with Malaysia is the fact that we have we farm out our thinking, right, to the religious authority, to an institution, which then gives you one opinion, and it's non-compliance. Then, if you do not comply to that one single opinion, it's considered an offense. You can be fined up to 3,000 or thrown into jail.
when this actually happened, like the idea that fatwa is supposed to be legally binding and people shouldn't challenge?
I think that came about with the emergence of the Sharia Criminal Offences Act, and I think that must have happened around the 1980s. Yep, when these laws first emerged.
How is the Sharia law different from the fatwa?
What do you mean?
As in, is the Sharia law actually, because that one, it's actually punishable by the court, but not for the fatwa?
So I think what she meant is how different it is, the laws within the Sharia court, that you have to go to the court and be persecuted for whatever act it is.
Well, technically with the non-compliance of a fatwa, which is considered a Sharia criminal offense, you would then be charged in Sharia court.
Oh. So even fatwa is part of the Sharia criminal court.
Because it's not under civil law. Non-compliance with a fatwa, for example, is not a civil offense. It's deemed a Sharia offense.
Okay.
And so you would, if you say, for example, there are plenty of fatwas which are gazetted but not enforced. For example, the fatwa on smoking. I mean, everybody's so familiar with the fatwa on smoking. In Selangor, I think it's even gazetted. I believe it's gazetted. And so technically, if the Sharia enforcement officers wanted to catch men or women who were smoking and then charge them in Sharia court, they could.
So,
or and there are other fatwas out there as well.
Any other bizarre fatwa that you came across when you're doing your researching?
I mean, aside the fatwas on yoga and whatnot, but then there's also this really interesting that you should ask. There's this really bizarre fatwa, or at least a fatwa that I found rather strange and relatively unknown, is the fatwa that ASN, ASN and ASB, Amanah Saham National and Bumiputra, are actually haram.
Really?
Yes.
In which state?
Well, the fatwa exists in Selangor. I'm not sure what other states have issued this fatwa, but at least, and this is something I had not known until I stumbled across it. I was just like, what?
Why Putrajaya haven't filed a judicial review on that?
But apparently, and this story, was relayed to me by Zaina Anwar. And she was saying that when they asked why this fatwa wasn't made public or announced to Muslims, the response was, we just don't want to confuse Muslims. Apparently, there's so many things that confuse us now.
There's something new to me.
Right.
ASB is
right.
haram.
Right.
So, with all this bizarre fatwa, is there any reaction from Putrajaya? Because we know Azmin Ali commented something which didn't sit well with SIS.
Well, Azmin Ali is the Selangor state, lah.
Yeah.
I would, But Putrajaya, thus far, we've not received any response or reaction. No official response or reaction. And Like the only response thus far has been from the MB of Selangor.
Mm. Was it like a casual comment, or was it like a statement that he was directing towards SIS at that time when he commented that the fatwa, SIS should respect the fatwa that was being gazetted by the Selangor Fatwa Council?
I suppose he was directing it at us, but I mean, in response to a question, of course, that the press had then asked him, So, but again, with all due respect, what does respecting a fatwa mean? Does that mean that, we're supposed to acquiesce to accusations that we subscribe to liberalism and pluralism and thus deviant without even knowing what on earth liberalism and pluralism mean? What does that mean? With the fatwa on ASN and ASB being haram, is the MB going to ask people to respect that fatwa as well? I mean, which fatwas do you respect? Which ones do you not?
Mm-hmm.
This fatwa on smoking, is he going to direct people to respect that fatwa as well?
Mm-hmm. Seems like fatwa is being made in secrecy. Unless you go to their website, you wouldn't know like anything would be haram or would be something that is against Islam according to the Fatwa Council. So I'm just wondering like why they are doing this, and can they simply, deem certain organizations, certain movement as haram just like that?
Oh, that's what we're going to find out with the challenge. Because we don't touch on matters of Aqidah, really. We are, again, a women's rights organization.
Mm-hmm.
We don't, so I'm not really sure what to tell you about that,
But what are the possible consequences that you may face in case the Fatwa Council want to press on this in this particular fatwa?
Sorry?
What kind of possible consequences you may face in the future if the Fatwa Council of Selangor want to press forward with this fatwa, like what we see a couple of decades ago in the 90s, where they want to insist that Malay Muslims shouldn't join beauty queen contest?
Well, they have, in fact, gone ahead with the fatwa. The fatwa is in effect, which is why we're challenging it.
But, in terms of the consequences, let's say they want to send MAIS down to raid the office. Would they do that?
Knock on wood?
Would they do that?
I don't know if they would. They'd need a warrant. But at the end of the day, at risk, what is at risk are the fundamental liberties that I mentioned earlier. It implies that somehow this is we want to ask, is the state more powerful than the federal government? Can state agencies like state bodies like the State Fatwa Council direct federal bodies, federal institutions? Can it direct the federal government? It means like that at any moment a state body can ask, for example, the MCMC to block a website or restrict the internet, or the Home Affairs Ministry to ban and seize books. Is that what we're saying?
Is this also showing that Malaysia is heading towards a particular direction, which is more religious fundamentalism?
Yes, but in that sense, it's interesting because in Malaysia, politics and religion are so closely tied, and so religion in this case seems more like a tool which particular institutions and bodies can use to maintain power over the lives of voters, and really it's primarily bound by politics.
Mm-hmm. So your sister in Islam is seen as a threat for the centralization of the power of these people?
Possibly because we challenge some of the things that they say. In the sense that, we challenge, for example, the idea that men can beat their wives, and we give theological arguments as to why wife beating isn't sanctioned in Islam. When, for example, I mean, let's just use a recent example, with the dog petting event. I want to touch a dog, I think the religious authorities pointed out that it goes against the Shafi'i mazhab, that under mazhab Shafi'i it's haram.
A Muslim only need to follow just one if.
But there are several inconsistencies with that, because we do, they claim that only in Malaysia we only subscribe to mazhab Shafi'i, which isn't accurate. Our own laws draw from other mazhabs, other schools of jurisprudence in Islam. Our zakat fitrah is the fact that we pay in cash is from mazhab Hanafi, So the fact that we actually, in practice, do not strictly adhere to Shafi'i is contradicts what they're saying, that we can only follow one, and this one is mazhab Shafi'i.
And to many Muslims, this is something of a shock, because a lot of them, this is the first time they ever hear that we don't totally follow the mazhab Shafi'i. Do you think religious authority are taking advantage of the ignorance of some Muslims so that they can seek power of control?
I think religion.
What is the right way of,
Well, I think religion is a pretty sensitive matter, in the sense that, a lot of people are reticent to talk about religion because they feel like they don't have enough knowledge, they don't have enough, and so they tend to, or some people might farm out their thinking to more people who they consider more learned, right? Tak apalah, I shouldn't really have an opinion. Let's ask or consult someone who knows better. And to some extent, that's fine. But at what point do you stop? At what point do you take responsibility for your own thinking and then say, hey, let me read, let me find out what's going on. Why are these decisions being made? Why are we going in this direction? Why did the religious authorities say, for example, that it's, that we cannot say touch a dog? Why did they say that ASN and ASB are haram? Why is smoking haram? I mean, you can either acquiesce and just submit to the authority of the religious departments, or you can empower yourself with knowledge and choose to read and find out why. And then, and for us, for example, one of the things that we realized, there's a different basis for a lot of things. There are a slew of opinions out there. But why is it that, in particular, when it comes to women, the religious authorities choose interpretations that are the most conservative? Mm-hmm. And essentially, the Sharia laws in this country are not divine. They are not from God. These are laws that are man-made. They are drafted by men and therefore utilize human interpretation, which is fallible. And therefore, you can, if the laws here then discriminate against women and the outcomes are unjust, then we have a right to challenge those laws. Because if Islam, again, our proposition has always been, look, if Islam is just, and if Islam, mendukung like these values of justice and equality, but the laws that the laws that are passed in this state, for example, in this country, lead to injustice.
Mm-hmm. So what's the way forward? Because how long you should wait for them to reply back, or for them to actually negotiate or discuss with you over this matter?
Well, I mean, the matter's in court now. Mm-hmm. We've submitted an application, so. There was some news that the Selangor MB had indicated that the Mufti or Maiz was willing to meet with SIS. As of yet, we have not received an official invitation, and that was yesterday when we heard of that. So we'll see. I mean, it's in court, so let the legal process go on.
Mm-hmm. So now your job is, I mean, in Sisters in Islam, you're just waiting, and don't know whether they will, actually open this issue, or they will just say that it's done, it's there, so we are not going to talk about this.
I mean, obviously we're talking about it, right?
I mean, for the Fatwa Council.
I don't know what their reaction is. I mean, so far we haven't received a response. We don't know what the Mufti's position is, for example, or what the Selangor Fatwa Council is thinking, because they haven't made a statement, or at least they haven't communicated with us. I mean, we'll wait for their invitation.
I'm just curious. Before this particular issue, were there any particular body or person actually file a judicial review on a certain fatwa that they don't find it fits into their own framework?
Not that I know of, no.
So this is the first ever?
Yes.
So the outcome is something that you don't know what to expect.
It can be quite interesting for those reasons alone.
So just last question about the future of Malaysia, because we are heading towards a direction that is quite clear that Malaysia's Sharia court is getting more conservative and seems like it's not open to other forms of understanding of Islam. So how can bodies like Sister in Islam and other groups that promote a different sort of understanding or of Islam will be able to, be grounded in this country and without and still be able to push forward, the kind of framework within the public?
Well, the understanding of Islam, I mean, let me be clear again, we're not trying to introduce some sort of new theology. What we are doing is the understanding of Islam that we are promoting, if any, is one that Islam is kind, compassionate, there is justice, and that there is a space for women's rights in Islam, for example. That is the Islam, the understanding of Islam that we want to promote and that we are promoting, So, I mean, these are interesting times, right? And I think there are several challenges right now in court against the religious authorities. So we'll see, these are interesting times. Obviously, we will not take this lying down, and we are moving ahead. Mm-hmm. And I think this is exactly what we need to be doing.
Mm-hmm. So this is beyond cultural war. This is
not a cultural war. This is, our state. This is our ability to continue doing the work that we do. I mean, to be quite honest, if there was no reason, the only way we wouldn't exist if there stopped being discrimination against women, stop discriminating against women, stop using religion to justify any discrimination towards women and children. And, we'd be happy to stop talking about religion in the public.
And you'll be working in other form of profession, probably.
Exactly.
Anyway, thank you very much. Thank you for sharing your view.
You're welcome.